Well done, Jeff.
That's John. Yeah. Down a bit.
I'm going to clean the window a bit more.
That's enough, John.
Yeah.
Hey, Rothschild, you got your meeting tonight?
A cynic once described the game of rugby as a brutal pastime pursued by gentlemen. The soccer, he claimed, on the other hand, was a gentlemanly pastime indulged in by brutes. As with all catchpenny phrases, there may be a grain of truth in it, but little more. For the average rugby club has long since lost its old-school tie image. Rugger men may still lay as much stress on their social activity as the 80 minutes spent in pursuit of an oval ball over the playing fields of England, but marathon drinking sessions, rowdy renderings of rugby songs tinted varying shades of blue, and wild escapades bordering on hooliganism are now only a minor part of the rugby scene. Playing the game on the field is now as important as playing the fool off it. Clubs, large and small, have spread their wings to take in a complete cross-section of the sporting public. For rugby is now the Saturday afternoon pleasure of banker and bricklayer alike, swapping their stories, buying their beer, and raising their voices in unison in the bar afterwards. In an age in which sport is ever more rapidly becoming dominated by big business, rugby remains doggedly steeped in tradition. The annual ritual of taking the team photograph for posterity and the clubhouse wall is as important today as when players wore those ridiculous baggy pants and sported bristling Victorian moustaches and sideburns. It is tradition that is the keynote of the current centenary celebrations at Clifton Rugby Club in the heart of respectable middle-class Bristol. Clifton were, in fact, only the 12th club in the British Isles to follow William Webb Ellis's example at rugby school and pick up the ball and run with it. 1872, their foundation year, seems in many ways far more than a century ago. Queen Victoria had already been on the throne 35 years and was beginning to disapprove of Gladstone as Prime Minister. Irish Home Rule, yes, the Irish question, was a major political issue. Clifton Rugby Club, unlike the other happenings, wear their 100 years well. They remain in many ways a 19th century sporting institution. Where else would you find a player, albeit from the 4th team, who insists on the groundsman ceremonially bringing him a glass of sherry from the bar at half-time?
Guests and gentlemen of the Clifton Rugby Football Club, would you please receive your chief guest, Mr. R.M.A. Kingswell, President of the Rugby Football Union, and your chairman for your centenary dinner, your president, Colonel G.S. Castle, MC, TDDL.
Happily, though, they've brought some things up to date. Their lavish centenary dinner, for example, resisted the temptation of repeating the pattern of an occasion before the First World War, when a match between a combined Bristol and Clifton side and the touring Australians was followed by a dinner with 18 speeches. At the centenary get-together, attended by their French guests and representatives from just about every club on Clifton's fixture list, there were just 5 speeches. But it would be difficult to find a more impressive lineup of VIP guests than Clifton collected for a function that had been 2 years in the planning.
Roast barons of Angus beef.
Highlight of the menu was a baron of Angus beef, provided with a suitable musical entree.
Please convey to the past and present members of the Clifton Rugby Football Club at their centenary celebration the sincere thanks of the Queen for their loyal greetings, which Her Majesty greatly appreciates.
And after the formalities, no rugby dinner could get off the ground without a song. This one was more for the benefit of the players than the top table guests.
She's working with the helping what we're doing.
Mr. President, Mrs. Molly Gerard, and gentlemen, may I first of all, for the benefit of the boys who are at the far end of the field on the dead ball line, say that there is a great affinity between the West Country and the North. If Mr. George McWatters has brought his box of rolls, may I remind him that this is only chicken feed.
Skipper Grant Watson was there to keep up Clifton's end of the speech-making.
Nous sommes très heureux de vous avoir avec nous. I realise that's lost all our prop forwards.
Another in the long line of Clifton's skippers and club secretaries, George McWatters.
But returning to our Trinity, the Rugby Union, a jolly warm welcome and a great acclamation for having the captain of the South African tour here.
Mr. President, gentlemen, first of all, thanks very much for the invitation here this evening. You didn't seem to get on too well with the French, so I hope you get on a bit better with a good broad South Gloucestershire accent.
Gentlemen, I give you the toast, the Clifton Club, and ask you to couple with it your captain, Grant Watson. Gentlemen, the Clifton Club.
The club have emphasized their tradition in planning their crowded season of centenary events. They have reenacted their founding meeting on September 27, 1872, at the actual pub, the King's Arms, still standing on Bristol's Black Boy Hill.
Gentlemen, order. Gentlemen, order, please. Order.
20 people were present at the inauguration and agreed to form the Clifton Rugby Club by unanimous vote. Club colours were chosen as black and lavender stripes and remain the same ever since. And among the 10 rules drawn up was one agreeing that the game should be played as at Clifton College, except that no kicking or tripping be allowed.
Game upon a variety of fields. And we have suffered the indignity of ribald comments from the hoi polloi of the neighbourhood. As gentlemen, I believe we all feel that we should obtain a private field in order to ensure that we improve and play the game in the style of gentlemen. Gentlemen, I would like to put to you the following resolution, that we do form a rugby club to be known as Clifton Rugby Club, and that the colours should be lavender and black, and that the game should be played as at Clifton College, except that
the first ever match was played on a Bristol farmhouse field against a college side from Bath, with 20 players on each side, 16 forwards, 2 half-backs and 2 goalkeepers. There was no referee, and the laws decreed that the captains of the respective sides shall be the sole arbiters of all disputes. In those early days, matches were decided by the number of goals kicked, and Clifton won their first encounter by a goal, 3 tries and 2 touches to nil. The Lord Mayor of Bristol became president of the club in their very first season, and civic support played a large part in Clifton's rapid expansion. By the 3rd season, they were unbeaten in all 11 matches and had already provided their first 2 internationals to an England rugby union formed only a year before them.
What subscription do you envisage for the club, Mr. Chairman?
the subscription will be 1 guinea, sir. That will include tea.
It was in this 3rd season that they first played and defeated a representative side from South Wales. The return game against South Wales in 1875 had to be cancelled as the Welshmen were unable to raise a team. Imagine that happening today in a country where rugby has become a second religion. These strong links with Welsh clubs were recalled in the centenary celebrations last month by a special match against the powerful Newport team. Clifton recruited 6 Bristol players for the occasion, including England international Alan Morley, who scored one of their tries. And despite playing more than half the match, a man short, Clifton launched their celebrations with a surprise 15 points to 9 win.
Gentlemen, I give you the toast, the Clifton Club. Gentlemen, the Clifton Club.
The organisers of Clifton's ambitious programme of centenary events made quite sure that rugby matches against prestige opponents were given due importance. The successful encounter with Newport was followed 10 days later by an even more dramatic win over French club Beagles, who were the 1970 French champions. A brilliant try in semi-darkness by fullback Mike Mason in the final minute of injury time clinched the result by 15 points to 13. It was quite a night for Mason, who also kicked 3 penalties and a conversion to score all his side's points. Both centenary matches had to be played early in the evening, as unlike the more affluent gate-taking clubs, Clifton have only sufficient floodlighting for training purposes. Yet as far back as 1882, Clifton's pioneer spirit took them to what must have been one of the first ever sporting encounters played under floodlights. It was a match at Weston-super-Mare, watched by 4,000. But a contemporary report records that a cable fault caused one of the lights to fail, and often a player chased a shadow of his opponent rather than the man himself. 9 years later, in 1891, Clifton were to strike another spark when they agreed to allow ladies onto the ground for the first time, and free at that. The club minutes, perhaps a little tongue-in-cheek, remark that the ladies have since learnt to take a great interest in the matches. Or was it in the men? Clifton have always been among the most adventurous of clubs in spreading the rugby gospel far and wide, and in recent years have brought back a host of memories and trophies from as far afield as Spain, Italy, Denmark, and the United States. When they went to the States in '67, they even packed a cabaret act in their baggage, wearing the obligatory tour gear of bowler hats.
Now the Germans started bombing as it was getting dark, and the fullback caught one in his arms, and the fairy shouted, "Mark! Oh, there's fairies in the threes, you know, there's fairies in the pack. And if you look behind you, there's a fairy at fullback. Oh, what a team! Oh, what a team! We got the reputation having fairies in our team."
Touring, as with so many activities, is part of their tradition, in their blood. As early as 1906, they played their first overseas match at Paris against Stade Francais on the Bois de Boulogne. The First World War was preceded by several difficult seasons, and then, of course, all sporting activity came to a halt. Clifton lost 45 members on active service. Revival in 1919 seemed pretty problematical too, for the club had no ground, no money, and only 3 playing members. Those times are vividly recalled by Victor Fuller Eberle, now in his 88th year and still alive.
I first started playing for Clifton in 1905, but my family interest has been pretty much longer than that. My uncle Charles Strawn was the first captain in 1872, and he was captain re-elected for the next 4 years. And I think my father was the first honorary member, and about a dozen members of my family have been connected with the club. And I have a great love, we all have, for the old club, which gave us so much enjoyment when we were younger.
But the difficulties came after the First World War.
That was the critical time. During the First World War, the club had 5 years, over 5 years, in which everything went dead. Their ground was taken, made into allotments. They had no reserve money. There were 45 members killed, 3 teams, and they were out of the first 3 teams that were playing pre-war. And when we met in April, I came back from the war in April, and we met a few weeks later to see whether it was possible to carry on the club. We routed round and found that there were 3 men, and only 3, who were really able to carry on for the club. In spite of that, our little meeting, there were 9 of us, 4 of us were ex-captains, and the rest ex-committee men. We said, we're going to make a fixture list. And we made a fixture list, and we hoped that the men will come along, and they came along. That was the nearest point the club has ever had to vanishing.
Clifton were never afraid of pioneering and were the first rugby club to fly to an away match. The year 1932. The opponents, Glamorgan Wanderers in Cardiff. And the mode of transport? No fewer than 7 light aircraft belonging to a local air taxi service. Each aircraft had to make a number of journeys, but despite the excitements of the day, Clifton still managed a 5-all draw. Although all club activities were suspended during the Second World War, a highly successful club newsletter eventually found its way all over the world. It contained news of members in every branch of the forces, including a classic letter from a prisoner of war that got by the German censors. We are being well treated and the food is very good. Our guards treat us kindly. Please tell this to our friends in the Air Force and the other services, but above all, tell it to the Marines. Now in the 1970s, tradition has become mingled with the do-it-yourself approach that's necessary to keep the smaller rugby clubs alive and kicking. If you want to play the game, then you must also help run it. Clifton, in recent years, have been the first British club side to play in Barcelona, Boston and the Bahamas, but only through strenuous money-raising and organising efforts by their own members over many months. The days when the club drew strength from the wealthy former public schoolboys are long since over, and apart from a handful of big matches a season, gate takings are non-existent. Clifton run their 6 sides every Saturday on the proceeds of annual subscriptions from 200 or more members, on lotteries and competitions, on frequent dances and wine and cheese parties, and above everything else, on the bar takings on a Saturday night. Even so, rugby remains the most amateur of sports, and it's the players themselves who run the bar, argue the selection toss, organise the annual dinners, act as hosts when overseas clubs pay return visits, and keep those after-match drinking bouts in full swing. Why do they do it? What persuades a busy Bristol businessman to take perhaps the most arduous club office of all, that of club secretary, for more than 16 consecutive years? John Goff, a company secretary in business life, puts it this way.
Well, I suppose it's my hobby. It fits in somehow. Certainly when I was a player, the most important thing was that I was a member of a club which was run by the players, for the players, so that the players were getting what they wanted. They ran the committee, and they always have. I mean, I, as secretary at the moment, am the only person on the committee who is not a playing member.
The players spend many hours organising overseas tours.
I think this is probably, one of the examples of what happens when you've got a club run by the players. There's a lot of hard work going into it, and if the people who are going and are going to get the fun out of it are running it, then they run it really well, because they're running it for themselves.
Playing for the Cliftons of the rugby world demands this sort of fanaticism. A fanaticism that persuades you to turn up for training twice a week for 8 months of the year, often in freezing weather, ankle-deep in mud, and the balm of a hot bath afterwards very much in the lap of the gods. A fanaticism that accepts being selected for the 5th team playing away when there's an international on television, knowing that as many as 3 or 4 players may not turn up anyway, that the referee is likely to be recruited from the touchline, and that the chances of everyone appearing in regulation club colours is remote indeed. Grant Watson, who works as an estate agent, has been recalled as Clifton's captain for the centenary year. He explains why he's been attracted back to a job that's as demanding off the field as on it.
I suppose I agreed to take on the job as I felt it was a tremendous honour to come back and captain the club during the centenary year. I have done 3 years previously, and although I'm getting towards the end of my playing career, I felt that this was an opportunity not to be missed.
Then there's the amount of time to be devoted to the job.
Well, it involves a terrific amount of time. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been involved in rugby club affairs, I think without exception, on every evening.
You have to be able to laugh at a newspaper report on your game, which begins, "An academic point which will be discussed for a long time is how large a part a white bull terrier played in Clifton's win over Old Alanians at Eastfield. He appeared on the pitch 3 minutes before the end, adding confusion to an already confused passage of play. He didn't succeed in getting the ball or any of the players, but the Clifton left wing went over for a try with the dog leading the general pursuit. This brought Clifton a win by 2 tries to a dropped goal." It was a chastened club member who explained afterwards that he'd been keeping the dog, appropriately named Worthington, on a tight lead, but when the Clifton wing began a great run down the touchline, it was just too much for Worthington. He plunged forward and dashed after man and ball. The animals scattered the visiting defence, and Clifton scored the winning try in the corner. The only comment from the skipper of the disgruntled opposition was, "Well, that's the first time we've been beaten by a bloody dog." Now Clifton have their sights set on the future. A special committee is looking into the possibility of selling the ground for building land and moving to a new home close to the motorway network on the edge of Bristol. They'd be able to have several more pitches, a new clubhouse, floodlighting, and possibly even squash courts and other indoor facilities. But whatever happens in the future, there'll always be that risk of your wife or girlfriend becoming a rugby widow, having to listen to those boring action replays in the bar, or being volunteered into cooking the endless sausage and beans after-match meals. It's a brand of fanaticism that has kept Clifton alive and kicking for 100 years, and may well do so for 100 years more.
We are the Clifton men. Belgium 1969, we won the cup with a uncrossed line. CLIFTON, we are the Clifton men. 20 farmers crossed the seas to beat them all with equal ease. CLIFTON, we are the Clifton men. CLIFTON, 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 we are the Clifton men. Hey! CLIFTON, we are the Clifton men. And we went to the USA, so the Yankees have to play. CLIFTON, we are the Clifton men.
Hello?